Yeah, bear with me and I'll just start recording.
Okay, we good to go?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, welcome everybody to November's People Policy Development Committee. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
I've got apologies today from Councillor Gloria Tanner, and I think Julia Manser's not able to join us today either.
Okay, thanks, Alice. I can see Amy's on the call anyway, so that's fine. Brilliant. Second item on the agenda is disclosures of personal prejudicial interest. I don't think there are any, unless I'm mistaken. No, okay. And then the minutes of the last meeting, which was in October. Any matters arising? Are we happy to move those?
I move for you, Chairman.
Thanks, Baxter. And someone second that?
Yeah.
Okay, and Steve. Thanks, Steve. Steve Gallagher to second those. Alison. Okay, first item on the agenda is the Children and Young People's Rights Scheme. I can see Katie Spendiff's with us. Who's just going to give us a verbal update, because obviously there's been a bit of progress on this through council, as we know. So Katie can give us an update on that and tell us where we're likely to go next.
Hi all, you okay? Firstly, apologies for missing the last PDC that I was supposed to be at. I've been off and well, and Alison, I've just come back, and I'll send through the verbal update that I'm about to send out with the minutes, if that's okay for you, Alison. There's a bit of a list, so bear with me, but really it's just an update and to see how we can link up on some of the work that's going on. So last time I saw you, the consultation around the Children's Rights Scheme and priorities for children and young people were taking place. It was just after the summer, and since then we've been working on collating that, taking it to council, and the Children's Rights Scheme, including a sort of more accessible plan on a page, was unanimously passed at council a couple of weeks ago. So it was universal children's. So obviously thank you, and that's really good news to see that, for a second time have that support. It was Universal Children's Day on Saturday and the 32nd anniversary of the UNCRC, and to mark that in Swansea, Councillor King sent a resource pack to all schools and organisations within the Children's Rights Network, which included a covering letter of thanks of partnership support that services provide to us to help make rights a reality, and copies of the policy, the posters on a page for children and young people so that they could be put up in organisations, and contact details. So if children and young people want to engage, they can get in touch with that. So that's been really well received. And, as people are starting to recover from lockdown and are back out and about, hopefully the city's been a little bit flooded with these posters of what our expectation is. So you'll know from that consultation and from council that our plan this time was trying to put some pledges in place. So what does children's rights mean, but actually what is it that people can expect from the council to see in terms of participation, equality, and those sort of things. And the next step for us really is to put an action plan in place for that. Overwhelmingly, the feedback from the consultation was children's rights is one thing, but the proof is in the pudding, and how we move forward as a council to make that real for children is something quite important. So we've got some workshops coming up, some for the Children's Rights Network and some for children and young people, to come together and look at what do we need to measure, what's already measured, and where are the gaps, how can we show our impact and demonstrate that. So we'll be working on that. So that's really exciting. That's been launched, revised. I think it looks good. It feels a bit smarter. It's got some really tangible things that we can do. And then out of the priorities that children and young people had set, 6 key themes for forum work have been developed. And since that was passed through council in September, we've been working on 3 of them and a couple of extra pieces of work. So if I can just quickly go through some of that, and then if you've got any questions or any opportunities where you want to link, that would be great. So probably the biggest piece of work we've been doing in the last 6 weeks has been around safeguarding. So it's in 2 themes. The regional Young People's Safeguarding Board have been working on equality for the LGBTQ community of young people. So they've been working with young people in East Batalba and have developed a really great resource pack for schools called Equality. That's been printed and launched again. The West Glamorgan Safeguarding Board have paid for that resource to be developed for every secondary school across Neath Patolba and Swansea, and the young people are just looking at a sort of train the trainer support resource to help that. So if teachers wanted to pick that up as a part of the curriculum, they could, and have those conversations with young people in schools. So that's been really positively received, and work is ongoing around how teachers can be supported to have those conversations in school if they feel comfortable, and if not, maybe external organisations as a part of the PSE curriculum to do that. And then the second part of the safeguarding work that we've been doing is about safety of young women in public spaces. So particularly falling out of the Sarah Everard and Sabina Nisa media information, you know, around those things. Young people, male and female, around Swansea have been raising young women's safety as an issue. That won't be a surprise. I know there's lots of work going on around it, but we've been working with the Police and Crime Commissioner and South Wales Police to do forums with young women and young men to look at what are the issues in terms of young women's safety in Swansea. And we've just started a small working group with schools, the Education Authority, the Domestic Abuse Hub, the police and crime commissioner, Freedom Leisure, and the Swansea Council Sport Department to look at some of the findings of that. So some of that is about young women's sports opportunities, so maybe through Freedom Leisure and through other local gyms, and maybe looking at the opportunity of supporting women to feel empowered, to feel able to defend themselves safely, or some of the feedback was about how young women should or could keep themselves safe. But we're very, very conscious that the narrative shouldn't be that women need to do things to keep themselves safe. So we're working with the Domestic Violence Unit and the police around the White Ribbon Day All Men Can project to look at potentially developing some education resources around what young men can do to help protect and keep young women safe. So we've actually got some sessions tomorrow, specifically with young men around their feelings around that. You know, not boy bashing in any way, but talking about changing that narrative, shifting that to what we can do to support young women to be safe, rather than it being what young women have to do to protect themselves to be safe. So that's really been exciting, and there's a lot of appetite for it around the council, so lots of services coming together to support these young women and men to work on it. So that's one piece of work that we're doing. The next is Votes at 16. That was a theme that came out of the consultation. So Democratic Services have just appointed an officer, a part-time officer specifically to work on engaging voters under the new Act, including young people, to register to vote. So we're working together and with the Senate and the Children's Commissioner's Office to put an offer together about not only increasing awareness and ability to register to vote, but also in understanding the voting process and where and how to access that. So that's really exciting. And then the third piece of work is around protecting your local environment and climate change. So young people have been linking with the Head Teachers Climate Change Forum, the Environment Centre and Natural Resource Wales, and we'll be holding our first forum of that group in January. They'll be having, it's our first forum where they're actually coming together physically and having space to talk about not only the Council's climate change pledge and charter and policy, but also the things that we can do to work together and set priorities to protect their very local environment and the local spaces. So they are the things that we've been doing with young people and children that are based on the priorities that came out of the consultation. And then another piece of work that's extra to that we've been working on is the Human Rights City. So we've been supporting Councillor Gibbard to visit children and young people. So over this week and the next 2 weeks, we're going to 12 different groups of young people, some online in teams, where they felt like that was the most appropriate way to meet, and some out in the community, in schools and in community groups. So that's really exciting to start that conversation about what a human rights city might look like, what human rights mean to them, and that extension of our commitment to children's human rights across communities. Often we talk to children, and as much as they are interested in their own rights, they're interested in the rights of their parents, their grandparents, their peers. So that would be really exciting. And we're also, like I said, holding workshops with them in the first week of February to help for children and young people to help co-produce the Children's Rights Scheme Action Plan. Usually we would go to counsellors and to the Children's Rights Network and develop those indicators, but it's really important for us that through all of the forum work, children are able to co-produce that with us, so they are actually taking a steer on some of that and what those measurements look like. So that's probably a lot of information. It was really a sort of reassurance that things are really moving since the report and the Children's Rights Scheme was signed off. There's been a lot of appetite with young people. It's really nice to get back out and see them and get together with people. So it's really just to update you, receive any questions if they're not too hard, and make the links really if there's other things going on or anything that as PDC you want to come to or be involved in.
Okay, that's great, Katie. I mean, wow, there's a ton of stuff, isn't there? And there's already is fantastic. Yvonne has indicated, and then Leslie.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Katie, for the report. And as Kerry said, there's quite a lot happening. But I was just a quick question. With the Human Rights City, you are going to be consulting young people, did you say?
Yeah, so I think as a part of the wider Human Rights City engagement work, I know there's been contact from our team and across the council with people 50 plus parent carers, but my part of that is around engagement with children and young people. So Caris in our team has sent information out through our networks, and then settings that were able to or wanted to meet with the cabinet member to discuss that have come forward and booked in.
Okay, my general question and concern is that it's usually the people who are, let's say, that are in the know already in the room. And I was wondering, are we going to be making extra effort to involve young people who I say are at the window looking in? Yeah. They're not confident, they don't belong to any of those organizations in school. Yeah. They're not on the Voice, they're not on the, so are we by any chance not exactly going to overlook the tried and tested, but try and engage young people who are not involved?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I think it's something that is a continuing piece of work and a difficult thing when children and young people aren't engaged in services. It's a real challenge about how you might engage them. Some of the things that we are doing is trying to widen the network. So the network is not just schools, but organisations that represent children with protected characteristics or may sit, looking in, less likely to engage. And certainly that's not perfect. Some of the other stuff that we're trying to do is rather than have the same group of young people be involved each time, every opportunity is offered out across that network so that people, it doesn't and shouldn't be the same children and young people every time, because if it's an issue about a specific thing, then it should be the young people that it's relevant to. We've also tried to extend it so that it's not meetings with, like you said, the school council or the eco council, but perhaps across classes, age ranges and things like that. But I think you're right. I think there's work to do. We do make a point of targeting, if you like, or directing our invitations at services that specifically work with children with protected characteristics, whether that's gender, race, disability. But it's not perfect, and I would definitely be welcome suggestions about how we do that. One of the priorities that came out from children and young people, and it's something that Caris in our team will start working on in the new year, was specifically around quiet voices and those children and young people who don't have opportunities to sit on forums or don't want to. be on a forum or meet with adults who really have valuable things that they want to say about their own lives, and we'll be looking at developing systems that support children to be able to speak anonymously or speak to their trusted adults rather than, coming to a forum. I guess the challenge of that is, how do you get young people together to talk about young people who don't have opportunities to come together, and how do we get to those children and young people? And I think that's something we as a whole council really need to work on. I'm not sure I've answered your question more than you're muted.
Sorry, you have answered my question fully, but there is just one thing. I'm not sure if this is possible or realistic. Would there be any mileage in sending something out to schools?
Yeah, so the information goes to all schools. It goes through the newsletter to every teacher. So it goes to anybody with a hub account, and then it goes our way of trying to access organisations outside of schools. Then it'll go to the Children's Rights Network. To be honest, schools we have more engagement with than community services. I think as a result of the rights work we've done in schools previously, we've got good links with the direct rights teachers in schools. So the response is good. I think is how we build that, extend that outside of schools to the community organisations like East, like the YMCA, like the African Community Centre, like the Chinese Community Centre, where perhaps they're not the children that we see when schools respond.
Thanks.
No worries.
Thanks, Katie. Les?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Katie. Brilliant feedback, and it sounds like you're doing an awful lot, which is really, really good news. And it's really not so much a question, a minor comment, but I'm pretty sure you mentioned the buzzword co-production, which is something that I've been a total bore for ever since I got into it over the last few months. And I assume that's part of what your remit's going to do with all the projects that you've mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's something that I smiled a little then when you called it a buzzword, because it is that. And I think we've tried to be really clear by what we mean, because participation isn't necessarily co-production. Asking children and young people doesn't make it co-production. And I think, having had the opportunity to consult with adults and children around what the forum looks like, we've had to reflect, and actually bringing children together on their own and then feeding back to adults on their own isn't co-production. It might be meaningful, it might be inclusive, it might be good participation, but it's not necessarily co-production. So what we're really keen to do is get adults and children who have a stake in the subject together at the same time, so that they're not youth forums, but they're actually co-production forums of the people who are making decisions, so that they're together. So, for example, with the safeguarding work that we've been doing, the officers from the police and crime commissioner, officers from the 16+ domestic violence team have been there with children and young people, and those conversations are taking place together rather than taking place here and then being fed back there. And I think what we're really trying to do is look at how much influence do you have as a child or young person. We have to be honest about that, as well. Do you have influence in this? Where are the opportunities to have an equal stake? Let's have those conversations right from the beginning and develop, work together. Let's plan it, let's resource it together. And then we can say that, some of it is co-production, some of it is participation. And for some who don't want to be involved in those, in that level of engagement, it's still okay. It's still worthwhile. What you have to say is worthy. So I think you raise a really good point, and I think we're really trying to take the time to recognise what co-production means, and really for us that's about sharing power and taking our time to do it right and to do it early doors, so that we can work together through things and have the right people around the room and see young people as stakeholders rather than as consultees. I think is our goal.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Good, thank you.
Thanks,
These are hard questions.
it was a hard question. Steve?
this won't be a hard question. I will.
That's good.
You mentioned in relation to safe spaces and the tragic Sarah Everard, etc.
Yeah.
You mentioned a number of organisations, police, etc. Did I hear you mention Swansea Business Improvement District and Business Crime Reduction Partnership, which is being developed?
You didn't. No, you didn't.
Yeah, they have got a number of premises which are linked to, and it's not safe space is the word, because safe space is a home office project, but there is another safe something where young people, and it's clear it's not just restricted to young women, it's
Okay.
young people who feel concerned about their environment and about what's going on, and which is the direction you're taking, which funding has been agreed. If you want to drop me an email, I can point you in the right direction to the right person for contact on that.
That would be really great. Thank you. I haven't heard of that before. You did remind me that somebody who I hadn't mentioned that was on here was the community safety team. I know they've just had a large bid around safe nighttime economy, and we've linked in with them. Something that young people were talking about was about safe public spaces, and like you used to have, or probably still do have, the breastfeeding symbols on buildings, and you would know that is somewhere you could breastfeed. They were talking about how do you know, and how could people in the public in Swansea receive good training so that you knew that if you didn't feel safe in Swansea city centre, then you could go into a building and somebody would do that. But definitely, if I can drop you an email for that, and if you can direct me to them, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Because I know the Safe Swansea strategy is out this year. It finishes in 2021.
I will.
Partnership, Business Crime Partnership, have been asked to work with them to develop and looking at crime and safety.
Right. Yeah, no, that would be perfect. And I think
sort of clog up this, I'm quite happy to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, that would be great. If I drop you an email, and maybe we could catch up and look at their work and how this links to it. That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. That was really helpful, I think. So thanks, Katie. I mean, as others have already said, I mean, as you reeled those 5 things I actually counted that you talked about rather than 3 that you first mentioned, but as you reeled them off, they're all extremely valuable, meaningful sounding pieces of work, aren't they? And I think the question was, then how does the PDC support that or link in with some of those? I mean, the first 3 that you mentioned seem to me to be pretty appropriate here. The first one was about the LGBT work that you do, and the second one was around what you and Steve were just discussing there, the safety of young women in public spaces, and obviously votes at 16 plays with us. Whether that's this committee, I'm not sure. Whether there's another PDC that might be a bit better in that particular part of it, and the same for the climate change and the human rights city that you mentioned. It may be that particularly around the environment one, then maybe there's a better PDC for you to link in with around that particular aspect of work. But certainly the safeguarding items that you discussed would really fit with our remit, and I'm really interested. I was just going to ask whether with the LGBT element of work, whether you've linked in with the Swansea Pride at all. Obviously, we've got a link through the council through Elliot King, who's also the captain for Children's Services too, and Elliot has an organisational role within that. Whether I just thought it might be worth raising that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we attend regular briefings with Councillor King as our cabinet member for UNCRC, so he's aware. And then, but I think maybe like directly to that organisation, that would be a really good idea. I know that we've been involved with, I guess, the specific young people's group, like Young Vibes and things like that at the YMCA. But I'll action that and make sure that is sent, and we link directly with them.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, I think if I don't know what the other members of the committee think, and this is the opportunity if you've got a strong view or not. I think it would be good if we could continue to have input and support those particular items. I think around the first 2 things you mentioned around safeguarding, I think that would be particularly good. And it seems like Steve's got with his background in community safety, obviously, and his links to the police, that would be, we might have more the bases covered then on the different aspects of that, because again, that is a really wide potentially a very big piece of work, isn't
Yeah,
it? Because,
absolutely.
Because of the terms involved and the concepts involved, isn't it? Because safety means different things to different people, isn't it? So I don't know if other committee members happy with that. And obviously maybe reporting back to us on how the overall action plan is going as well, just for our information, Katie, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So the action plan for the Children's Rights Scheme, we're hoping to have ready by the end of March. So as we go into the new financial year, there'll be the action plan ready for that. I imagine there'll be a period of drafting and signing off for that, because it links to our commitment. But one of the things that Caris, our participation officer, and I are committed to do is provide quarterly infographics to young people and really importantly to PDCs, to Cabinet and to councillors about what's going on, so that we know that everybody feels in the loop and we can make those links. So what I'll make sure to do is that when this infographic is done, I'll also have that circulated, but perhaps a regular just drop in that I can update you on the ones that you feel are relevant to this PDC, and then two other PDCs. I should have mentioned the 2 areas of work out of the 6 key themes that we haven't picked up work on yet is engaging disabled children and listening to learners. So Child and Family Services are leading the Young People's Forum about how we best engage disabled children, what are their needs that we can accommodate best. And then the listening to learners one is the one that the education is you know what I mean, the Education Authority, that we will support them to think about how are we, like Yvonne touched on, how are we engaging with learners wider than the forums and councils that they have that do great work, but how are we engaging learners across the piece? If they have something to say, how do we listen to them, and how does it inform our planning? So I'll keep you updated on those as we go as well.
Great, and I'll email the other chairs and mention what we've talked about today, and then so we'll cover all the bases that way as well.
Yeah, that'll be great. If I send an overview of what we've talked about over to Alison, then you can send that or share that with the chairs as well, and they can decide what's appropriate. That's great.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, sounds fantastic.
That's lovely. It's good to see you all. I'll see you again soon. Take care.
Take care. Okay, we're on to the next agenda item then, which is agenda item 5, Swansea Council Volunteering Strategy Development again, which is a verbal update, and I believe Amy's going to be providing that.
Yeah, thank you. Tony and I are going to do a bit of a double on this, so I'll start us off. So as Julia updated you in the September meeting, we're building on some regional work that we've had funding for. I'll give you a bit of an update on that, and then Tony will pick up about, progress since the workshop, which was the last meeting we had. Regional work, we're building on the lessons learned during the pandemic, the increase in volunteers, the support and the good practice that's happened. This includes promoting resources for volunteering, which have been developed, so that's progressing well. As a part of this, a wider focus on the region around sort of winter pressures and how we can link volunteers in with supporting around winter pressures. We held an event, a number of partners, Council, Health Board and Third Sector, both in Eastport Harbour and Swansea, held an event last Tuesday called Possibilities for People. It was a discussion event and workshop with public, private, community and residents. And we shared case studies of community resources and community support, and looking how that can help reduce demand on statutory services, particularly as we're coming into the winter months, and looking at local solutions as well. There's some really good ideas that came out of that, and we're trying to progress with those as quickly as we can. This involves supporting carers more, so how we can enable people to continue their caring. So whilst not directly about volunteering, it was a really key theme throughout the whole event, and Julia and her colleague from Eastport Harbour, who's doing the same role as her, were supporting with that as well. The other thing, that's the winter pressures focus. The work is still progressing around, I think we mentioned this before, but just to let you know, this is progressing around how we can support volunteers within care homes as well. So this is linking with those sort of winter pressures, not exclusively only care homes, but it's an angle we know at the moment, where this can be done safely. This will be a real help across locally and across the region, both internally and with external providers as well. And we're also looking at work around turning volunteering into a career. So that's some of the work that's being progressed regionally. And then we had the workshop last time around the local volunteering strategy. So I'm going to hand over to Tony, if that's right, to give an update on that.
Thank you, Amy, and good afternoon all. Thank you. Yeah, I'll just be brief on this, just provide some feedback from the workshop that was held in October, there was positive feedback from both officers and members of PDC, both in the meeting and that was sent through following the meeting. So we're right now in the process of planning and the working group sessions with officers. So working closely with Julia Manser from SCVS as part of the programs that Amy was just talking about to plan those sessions, and lots of the feedback actually that we gathered from the October workshop and that PDC members fed in around, ensuring that the value of volunteers, there's value for the volunteers in the volunteering that they do as well as for the organisation, recognising formal and informal volunteering opportunities. Making sure that training records, for example, can be used in terms of supporting employability. What else? There's quite a lot. Looking at the need for ensuring that budgets are available in hosting teams within the authority to be able to pick up expenses, just to make sure that we are able in our strategy development to address the core principles of what volunteering is and making sure that we are doing everything within in our responsibility to make sure that experience is positive and all the support is behind the scene there for volunteers, including like having a clear framework and checklist of requirements for the volunteering and the opportunities that they're going to take part in. So at the moment, as I said, at the moment we're working closely with Julia to plan those sessions, which will take place, we're planning for them to take place over January and February. An important part of that process, and Katie was talking, and there was some discussion earlier about co-production. We do want to co-produce the development of this strategy as far as possible, and the working group will be looking at how we can do that in kind of good practice in its development. So using the working group to tap into people who are already volunteering within the authority, and how can we co-produce with volunteers that perhaps aren't taking up opportunities with the authority as well. So the working group will be tasked. There's quite a lot actually to look at, and we've already identified kind of what good practice is in terms of the principles of volunteering. We've done some research into other local authority volunteering strategies that have been developed, looking at what's been included. We've had some, as I say, some really good feedback in terms of shaping what the working group is going to have to look at to develop that. So the plan is that working group sessions will take place over January and February, with a view to, fingers crossed, and caveating that the timescales can be built in to actually co-produce and engage people in that process, because that's a really important part of it. But with the caveat that we are able to do that and use the working group members to be able to do that in that timescale, then we'd be hopefully looking to bring a draft strategy back to people PDC, perhaps end of February, and then of course recognising that from that point the draft strategy would need to go out to public consultation for a minimum of 4 weeks, and during which time we'd be able to work on the integrated impact assessment process that would also need to be completed, and can't really be completed until the end of the consultation period, because that would feed into the completion of that process as well. But that's a little bit about the process then in terms of how we move that draft strategy forward. I hope that's useful. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Amy. Anybody got any questions or comments to Amy and Tony? Nobody's indicating. I mean, that's great, guys. I mean, thanks very much. And it's really nice to have some timescales thrown in there as well, and the kind of and the process around those timescales, because that really gives us a sense of of the progress occurring. I know you mentioned it's only about the challenges around making sure that you're accessing the right people, but and you've got obviously SCVS are involved from a Swansea perspective, and so that gives us, in terms of what Yvonne was asking around the children's rights agenda, that does give us an added advantage here, doesn't it, in terms of us accessing certain communities as well. So hopefully we should see some positive outcomes as a result of that. So that's really positive, and I think it's a really good starting point. And I think we discussed this briefly last time, but if there are opportunities to pull us councillors in, if we're available, I think that would be great. I mean, I would be very open to be involved if it's appropriate. And I think that's great in terms of the timescales. If we can use the PDC to provide some oversight to that, and then progress that through to council, as we've done in the past with disability strategy, for instance, transition strategy. I mean, so policy, that would be really good. So I can't see anybody else indicating for a question, guys, but I think probably because you've explained so succinctly really about what the process entails. So thanks very much for that, and keep us updated really in terms of when those workshops are likely to happen, if there's involvement for not just us but obviously for all councillors across the authority, and feel free to come back to myself to publicise some of that amongst the members as well, if that's what you'd like to do. So that's great. So thanks very much again for coming on to the PDC and giving us your time and being so informative. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to agenda item 6, which is the young carers strategy. Alison, I haven't had any response from Gavin on this. I don't know whether you've had anything.
I've not, no.
Okay, I did check to see whether he'd come on. I haven't heard from him. There was a young carers strategy working group that was meant to take place last week, which was cancelled because a lot of people gave apologies, and I haven't really had an update since the last one really. So I know last time we talked about that the Young Carers Forum had some funding to do an away day kind of thing to help develop the strategy, and that's really as far as we've got. I know that day hasn't happened yet. I think they were looking to try and do it before Christmas, but I think that's probably pushing it now unless they've got a date planned. So I was expecting Gavin to come today, but that's okay. I'll double check with him after I come off this meeting now to see if there's been an update around the young carers strategy, because I know they were planning to hold that day before Christmas, which was going to really help us move forward in terms of the young carers strategy. And that's all I can really say about it at this point. Is there anybody want to say anything or ask anything around that particular piece of work? No? Okay, that's fine. So we're on to item agenda 7 then, which is the work plan. So next month we'll be looking at there'll be an update from Children's Right. There'll be an update from Young Carers, and I'll make sure that we've got a representative, either Gavin or the YMCA, to provide us with an update. And a council volunteer strategy as well, potentially be a verbal update. And we also need to go back to look at the employability agenda item, Alison, to put that on the next agenda. So I'll liaise with you outside of the meeting and speak to the chap whose name I forget, who was involved with that piece of work.
Elliot Williams.
And then and that will be on the agenda for next month as well.
Another item on then, isn't there, from Amy, if I remember rightly?
Was that Alison? Sorry, you broke up then.
There's another item on the agenda for the next meeting as well, so there's quite a lot. There's financial assessment guidance.
All right, okay.
That Amy wants to bring, so we perhaps need to have a chat.
Okay, we'll have a chat after this meeting. That's okay with everybody. Thanks, Alison. Okay, if nobody else wants to say anything or ask anything at this point, just like to thank you all for your attendance again. I'd like to thank all the officers for your support, particularly Democratic Services, and see you all again next month. Bye, guys.
Chairman.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.